Hi, I'm Kristen Amdahl. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful rose crochet flower topiary. I've been buying flowers for myself recently, and I love the feeling of having beautiful cut roses or bright colored flowers in the house, but they die so quickly that I thought maybe this is a good opportunity to make something out of crochet with flowers. And the last time I was walking through my local craft store, they had these really cool topiaries, which is just the stick with a foam base and a foam round ball at the top, and it was for pinning silk flowers too. And I thought, well, if you can do that with silk flowers, I bet you can do it with crocheted flowers too. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to crochet these flowers, which is a really unique technique of making a three-dimensional flower with petals without sewing. It's all done within the crochet. And just to point out a few things about it, instead of using flower pins, I used these pins which I found them in like the wedding section. They're hair pins that have rhinestones on the tips of them. So if you use the floral pins to pin your flowers to the foam ball, you can. You could hot glue your own type of decoration on it, or if you go into the wedding accessory department of a department store or even an online shop, you can find these hairpin decorations, which I thought were really dressy and fancy for the flowers. Going back to the floral department, I thought that this particular foam ball was a little bit of a small scale for the vase that I picked. So I ended up picking up these butterflies, which are another floral accessory, and pinning them into the flowers. Then for the base, I was wondering if I should use Spanish moss or some other type of project, a material that you would pick up and just use on its own. And I thought, well, what's the fun in that? I ought to crochet it. So I ended up making crochet corkscrews to kind of replicate the texture of Spanish moss in the base. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to make the flowers and the corkscrews. So let's get started. Here's a close-up of two of the flowers that are already finished. And what I want you to see is from the back side, it's just a flat flower. And because we worked through the back loop only, and we had those front free loops, which I'm going to show you in a minute, you're able to have a space to work this as part of the flower. So we work in a spiral, then when we come to the end, we come around, and the edging then comes back in on itself following that spiral. And it may or may not make sense now, but as we go along, it will definitely make sense. So let's start with our chain 5, slip stitch to the first chain at the beginning to form a ring, our chain 5 ring, and we're going to work single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet. Now the reason why we start with a single instead of with the double, which is what we're going to do for the rest, is because we're starting a spiral. So to start short and then work our way tall, you'll see at the end of this round we won't have to join. We can keep working in the spiral. So we're going to do the single, the half double, and then 6 double crochets in the ring. So we've done 2, there's 3, 4, 5, 6. So normally what we would do is slip stitch to the first stitch to make a round, and then chain up to the height of our next stitch and work the next round. But now we want to work in a spiral where we aren't actually closing off this round. We're just going to keep working around continuously, but counting so that we get our shaping that we need. And I want to point out that that first one there is the chain 1. There's our single crochet. And what we're doing is working through the back loop only. So what that means is instead of inserting the hook here through both of those loops on the top of the stitch, we're only going to insert in the one on the back side of the top. We're working, and the pattern calls for 2 double crochets through the back loop of that first stitch. So yarn over your hook, insert your hook into just that one back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Again, we're doing 2 stitches in each stitch around. So we'll do another double crochet through the back loop in that back loop. And what you'll see is we now have a horizontal line in the front of our stitch. That is what I call the free loop, and that'll make more sense when we get further along. So in the next stitch, we're going to work 2 double crochets through the back loop only. And you notice normally it would be through both of those loops, but we're just going to work through that back one. So yarn over your hook, 2 double crochets through the back loop of that next stitch. And we're going to do this for a total of 8 times, which is the equivalent of finishing this round. Again, we're working in a spiral, so we're not joining the round, but it is still a round. We have to count our stitches accordingly to get the right shaping to keep the circle. So in a second here, I'll count and make sure we're getting to where we need to be. I think we're at 7. Let's see, we'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, one more. So we'll work 2 double crochets through the back loop only in the next stitch. And if you've done top-down shaped hats or any type of a circular medallion, this might sound familiar to you. You do one, for every 1 stitch you do in the first round, you do 2 stitches in every stitch in the next round. Then the following round would be 2 stitches in the first, 1 in the second, and then repeat that around. So that's basically what we're doing, but without joining. We're continuing on in this spiral as we go. So the next round begins with 2 double crochets through the back loop only of the next stitch and 1 double crochet through the back loop only in the next stitch. So now those 3 stitches worked into the 2 of the previous round is what we'll repeat 8 times. So 2 double crochets through the back loop only and then 1 double crochet through the back loop only. 2 double crochets through the back loop only and 1 double crochet through the back loop only. You want to repeat that the 8 times to make our way around, and I just wanted to show you, see how we've got that free loop is becoming much more prominent. So go ahead and finish your 8 repeats of this, and then I'll show you how we start the beautiful flower petals. Round 3 of our spiral is now finished, and you see we have our stitches. We're going to turn our work and we're going to work in a stitch pattern around all of these stitches, and then we're going to work in the free loop around the rest of the spiral continuously in one piece. So let me show you how we start that. We're going to do a chain 3, which counts as our first double crochet, turn our work, and work 6 double crochets in that same stitch. And at this point we are now working in both loops of the stitch. Okay, that chain 3 counted as our first double crochet. We did 6 more for a total of 7. We're now going to skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, skip the next stitch, and work 7 double crochets in the next stitch. Skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next stitch, skip the next stitch, 7 double crochets in the next. And you want to repeat this around the entire round, and then I'll show you how we continue this pattern along the surface of the free loops of the rounds on the interior of the spiral. All right, so at this point we're well aware that the established pattern is 7 double crochets in the first stitch, skip 1 stitch, single crochet in the next, skip 1 stitch, 7 double crochets in the next stitch. So we've come to the end of our outside perimeter round, and now we're going to work in the free loops of the front of the spiral in round, that would be rounds 2 and 1. So we've finished our last segment of 7 double crochets in the next stitch, and now we're going to skip the free loop of the next stitch, and we're going to single crochet in the free loop of the next stitch. We're going to skip the next free loop, and we're going to work 7 double crochets in the next free loop. I love this technique for creating 3-dimension in what is normally flat stitch work. I've done this several times in some of my books, and I'll post links to those patterns as well if you're interested in the video description. Instead of sewing this on, like applique work you could do and sew it on afterwards, but it's just so much easier. Once you figure out this technique, I think it's so much easier to do it all in one piece. And certainly crochet is a lot tighter than sewing, so you wouldn't have to worry about it falling off after you washed it a few times if you weren't really confident in your sewing skills. Okay, so we skipped 1 stitch, single crochet in the next free loop, skip the next free loop, 7 double crochets in the next free loop. All right, we're going to skip the next free loop, single crochet in the next free loop, skip the next free loop, and 7 double crochets in the next. And I'm going to set our work down. I always like to pull my loop really long before I set my work down, because that way if the working yarn gets pulled, it doesn't unravel my stitches. You see we're starting to develop this 3-dimensional texture, and sometimes setting your work down helps you to see if everything is looking right, and especially having another flower to look at right next to it definitely validates that we're looking good so far. So we'll go ahead and keep going. We're going to skip the next free loop, single crochet in the next free loop, skip the next free loop, 7 double crochets in the next free loop, another tip that I wanted to point out to you, do you notice how I'm folding my work in half? If you fold your work in half right around that free loop so that it becomes the peak in, let's say, a mountain, I find it's a lot easier to get my hook in there. If I left it flat, sometimes it's hard to, I don't know, I think it's kind of, you can do it, but I think that it helps to positioning your yarn to get your hook where you want it to go is half the battle sometimes. And so folding it in half at the free loop is what helps me position my stitches, or position my hook to get into the stitches. Okay, so we skipped 1, single crochet in the next, skip 1, 7 doubles in the next, okay, we'll skip the next stitch, single crochet in the next, skip the next stitch. As we get closer to the center, it definitely gets a little harder to handle, but so worth it. Okay, we're going to skip that next stitch, 7 doubles in the next free loop, okay, let's see where we're at. Okay, we are at the end now. We only have 1 stitch left, so instead of skipping 1 and single crochet, I want to bring this down to the base. So I do want to end with a single crochet no matter where you actually are in the pattern. So I did a single crochet. I'm going to fasten off, But now what I want to do is, I don't particularly like how that looks, and if you notice on the ones that I have finished, what I've done is pulled my hook through the center ring and pulled that end tail through the hole. And when I secure my ends on the wrong side, what I'm going to do is make sure that that sits kind of tight down there. I think it's really pretty how it kind of stands up that way, so that's my opinion. You can do this any way you want. If you like it sitting flat, that's your prerogative. That's totally fine. Also, another point is that once you establish that round and if you wanted to keep going, you could definitely do a larger flower with with a larger spiral and more tiers of the petals. Once this is secured down and you attach it, like for example in the topiary, what I do to cover up all the foam of the base is get them close enough so that their outside petals are touching, and then put a little touch of fabric glue in between the two petals there, and that's what gives you it gives that outer petal more of a three-dimensional texture like the inner petals, and also covers the foam base. I'll show you a close-up of that on the finished topiary as well. Corkscrews are one of the easiest things to make. Basically, you're just going to chain as long as you want your piece to be, and I'm just going to do a couple of inches here just to give you an idea of what we're doing. And then you want to work a ton of increases in every single chain. So for this particular pattern, we're going to work into the 4th chain from the end of our loop, and you're going to work a double crochet, chain 2, 2 double crochets in the same chain. Because we started in the 4th chain from the loop, that what in essence we're doing is counting the first 3 chains as our first double crochet. So we're doing a shell in each chain across. 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. So I'll show you how that looks in the following couple of chains here, and we're going to insert our hook in the very next chain, work 2 double crochets, chain 2, 2 double crochets. And after a few repeats of this, your piece is going to start to get very, very ruffly. In the first few inches, it probably won't corkscrew, and that's okay. What it's going to do first is just ruffle, and when we get to that point, I'll show you how you coax it into the spiral corkscrew. And once you do that, every few inches, if you start to see a ruffle instead of the continued corkscrew, you just coax it along again. It's really, really simple, but gives you this really amazing texture. I did a scarf in this stitch pattern in my very first book, Wrapped in Crochet, and I've used it on and off over the years for different things. I think for this particular project, it gives you the texture and the dimension to replicate Spanish moss for the bottom of the topiary absolutely beautifully. Love it. And I did 2 extremely long ones for the topiary so that it kind of curls up and wraps around on itself like a bowl of spaghetti. You don't want to just do one layer. You want it to be so big that it just is a big curly mess. Mess on purpose. We like those, right? Okay, so we've got a few inches going here, and I want you to see how it's not quite corkscrewing. It's looking very ruffly, and all you want to do is give it a little nudge in the right direction to just start corkscrewing like that. And then I'll show you what that looks like on the finished piece. See, we've got a corkscrew done right here. I originally intended to make this topiary for myself, and I absolutely love it. But now that I know how quick and easy it is to make, I'm definitely going to be making it for gifts as well. Leave me a comment below the video and let me know if you make some for yourself and for gifts.